What's up, everybody? Couch Mills here, coming at you with a brand new Overwatch 2 video. And in this video, we gotta talk about which role you should main in Overwatch 2. Make sure to like and subscribe right now so you don't miss out on all of our future Overwatch 2 content. We're gonna be going hard as hell on this channel, so make sure you tune in. But let's jump into the main topic of the video, specifically which role you should main. And one of the things I've always taught on this channel, and I think it's one of the most important things for improvement, is specialization. Specifically, one of the things I see the most, especially out of the probably, I don't know, hundreds, maybe even thousands of people that I have VOD reviewed in Overwatch, is they try to juggle far too many characters to get good with any one of them. They'll try to play every single role, and not only that, they'll try to play the majority of each character in every single role. And while I think that it's good to learn every single role and every single character slightly, their abilities, how they play, if you're trying to learn the game, I do think that eventually, after you learn the basics, you need to dial it down and specialize. And the best way to explain this in terms that are non-Overwatch is like trying to go pro in a sport, right? If you're trying to go pro in tennis, you can't play, you know, an hour of tennis and then go play an hour of basketball and then go play an hour of fucking bowling and then go swim for an hour and go do this and do this other sport and do this other sport. You're gonna end up pretty decent at like a whole bunch of different sports, or maybe you just know the basics of a whole bunch of different sports, but you're not gonna be good at fucking tennis. You're not gonna go pro at tennis unless you spend every waking minute of your free time grinding that specific thing. And so the same thing applies for Overwatch. If you want to be a really good high-level DPS player, you need to focus on specifically DPS. And it's even further than that. You should pick a small hero pool, a small select characters, maybe 2, maybe 3, and only play those characters. Maybe have characters that have slightly different strengths. For instance, if you're a hit scan player, you could play Widow sometimes, you could play McCree other times, maybe you play Soldier depending on if you're in a dive, you need something that has more mobility, and those are the 3 characters you play. The same thing for tank players. You don't just become this like ultra flexible machine that can play every single tank in the game, which is going to be even harder as the tanking roster expands. You basically pick characters that are viable, a small amount of them, maybe 3, maybe 4, and you grind only those. You try to learn the intricacies. You get repetition with a whole bunch of different compositions against a whole bunch of different enemies. How do you combat really good players of this character? How do you combat really good players of that character? How do you play on this map? And you get all those repetitions in. Because if you can minimize your time, right? Let's say you are spending like the majority of your time grinding freaking, Cassidy. Grinding Cassidy, right? And you play for 20 hours a week and like 18 of those hours are on that character. If you instead played a little tanking, a little supporting, a little DPS, and then played like 4 of each, you would literally be dividing those 20 hours by 12. So each individual character will barely be played. And of course, playing the game in general is gonna make you better just across the board, but it's way smaller. It's like just trickling sand into that skill set rather than actually playing the specific character is going to make you a lot better than that character. And basically, the reason I say all this is what happens is these players have so many hours and they end up as a plat player in every single role, where, in my opinion, if they would have actually just specialized much harder, they would have been a high diamond, masters, grandmaster player, because they didn't use their time effectively. And that's why we bring you to the topic of this video. What role should you main in Overwatch 2? Which role should you actually decide on and specialize on? And what fits your play style? And how are they going to change going into Overwatch 2? And I think that the first one, of course, is that the off-tanking role is gone. There's just tank. And that means as a tank, now you need to make space. That is your goal, is creating space. And for the off-tankers, that's gonna feel a little bit strange, specifically because you could just be like a flanker or like a peeler before, where you were the off-tank. You were the Roadhog, the Diva, the Zarya. You could peel a lot, you could protect your team, and you never had to go and like brawl on the front line, dive into the team, or push the objectives, put your presence on the board as an off-tanker. You could do that to help your main tank, and a lot of times you would do that if you were good, but the main tanker always had to do that. And I think that that's gonna feel a little bit strange from the off tank, you're going into this new hybrid role. And from the main tanker, now you're gonna have to play some characters that are gonna require a lot more mechanical skill than maybe you were used to. If you were a Ryan and a Rissa main specifically, or even a Winston main, and maybe you didn't know, or Master Primal Rage, or whatever the case may be, now all of a sudden you might have to play some other characters that require more targeted mechanical skill. D.Va requires very, very high tracking. Zarya requires very high levels of tracking. So that's something else that is required of you. And then also you need to be thinking much more peel-centric sometimes, depending on the character you're playing, because a lot of the characters, like let's say Zarya is like the best tank in the meta, she has 2 bubbles. She has the ability to peel for her allies, and that is a huge part of her kit. And not only that, you need that tracking skill as well. So it's gonna feel like very strange. It's gonna feel like a really strange hybrid role where you're gonna need skill sets of both previous main tanks and off tanks, but luckily a lot of you have been learning those skills because you have been forced, even if you are a Zarya main, you have been forced to fill the Rhine. But specifically, let's talk about the play pattern of tank. What is required of you? What's your responsibility? And what are the big buffs that you're getting? So first off, the creating space aspect is big. And depending on the character you're going to play, you're going to often want to be the one that is making the most amount of presence. Now, you are going to be enabled in more ways than before. You are the sole tank that is going to get 2 healers worth of heals. Every single tank also has that CC reduction. And remember, CC is mainly put on the tanking role. So you're going to be less crowd controlled around with the other tank CC than your DPS or your support counterparts, which that's just, I think, a pretty good change across the board. It's going to make everything feel kind of like Ryan did before with his change. And of course, also from the tanking role, you're going to have all the CC. So if you're into crowd control, if you're into things that can stun people or just stop the fight, stop one of these pesky movers, these fucking gnats flying around you, that is going to be one of the few places you can find that kind of effect is in the tanking role. Now, there is no more duo tanking pairing, and I think that communication with your secondary tank was so important before. If you were a Zarya, talking to your Rhine, coordinating, going in and out, trading bubbles, trading engagements, that was incredibly important in the Rhine-Zarya duo, and the tanking duo combo was just so damn important. From scrims to ranked play to everything in between, it was so goddamn important, and it's gone now, which is definitely a little controversial. But ultimately, what you need to understand is now, as a tanker, there's a lot that is gonna ride directly on your shoulders. Basically, you not only have a lot of agency over the wins, but you could be responsible for a lot of the losses as well. The tank diff is gonna be one of the biggest metrics ever in this game. I mean, playing any role with a really bad tank is going to feel very frustrating, and playing tank when you are much better than the other tank is going to make things so much easier for your team. This creates additional responsibility, but you're going to have more of a chance to carry your games, especially if you are what we call the full package, someone who has the mechanical skill, the mind to back it up, able to create space, and still play the mechanically difficult roles to the higher percentile. As someone who is probably going to be a support main going into Overwatch 2, the tanking role still has me interested, and after I try it a little bit, I will decide whether or not I will devote the majority of my time to it. Still haven't decided yet, still deciding for myself personally. The next up, we do gotta talk about that supporting role. I did mention it, and in a previous video, I talked about why supporting is incredibly powerful in Overwatch 2. Now, there are a lot of reports that say that supporting does feel a little bit punished, right? Because the DPS players are moving so fast around because of their increase in speed and the fact that there's no dedicated peeler tank anymore, it feels like sometimes you are going to be left alone. Now, there's some supports that just purely get benefits from the new change. I specifically am talking about Ana, who not only gets to keep her CC, but she gets to just get that passive heal if she stays out of combat for a little while, which is great because often she could stay at a range where she could still be effective in the fight, but she's not taking any damage. Get that heal, doesn't have to use a self heal, so she could be more aggressive. But at the same time, there are more threats and they're coming in quicker. Specifically, characters that have these speed boosts now are flying in a lot faster than they did before. They might get into position to deal damage to you faster than before. So because of that, you're gonna have to be thinking a lot quicker. Things are gonna go a lot faster, and fights can end quickly if you are caught slipping, right? Out of nowhere, And while I'm pretty sure that Blizzard will make sure to balance the roles, at least at some point, it's probably not going to be balanced when it first drops, but at some point, they will make sure that the roles are properly balanced. Specifically, I'm curious of how they're going to handle characters like Mercy, who already have a passive regeneration. So giving Mercy, you know, if she's the only character that doesn't get a passive regeneration to her health because she already has one, then all the other supports get buffed besides her, which is a little bit strange. But regardless, I am very curious about the supporting role from some characters. I think some characters get hurt from these changes from a faster pace of play, but I'm curious in characters like Ana. I'm super curious in how strong Zen's gonna be, how powerful he is. And it looks like some of the supports that kind of play that DPS support hybrid, some of the supports that have a lot more offensive power are gonna be, you know, very, very strong in Overwatch 2, potentially. And some of the other supports might have a rough time, at least until they balance the roles. But going back into what role you should main in Overwatch 2, specifically, the thing that I like the most about support is the fact that there is only one tank to heal. I think that's one of the most freeing things for support. There's no longer this need to be constricted by main healer, off healer, how much heals does this comp have? Oh, we have low heals. Oh, I have to basically spend this entire fight because my other support fed and died. I have to spend this entire fight just healing my tanks nonstop or they will just fucking die. If I look away, they are dead. That kind of frustration out of the supporting role is gonna be gone. You might get dove a lot more. You might get jumped by these fucking DPS mains. But at the end of the day, some of the boring, monotonous, just tank takes damage, you heal him. Tank takes damage, you heal him over and over and over again. A lot of that is not going to be in place as severely, which I think is going to be a freeing thing for supporting roles, regardless of the balance involved. I think, while there is a cost in getting less peel, you are going to be healing a lot less overall, which I think is probably a good thing for most people. Some people might not like it as much, but I'm actually curious how you feel about that down below. Now, last but certainly not least, we do got to talk about the DPS. And DPS is getting a static increase in speed across the board, which is, of course, going to make some characters quite a bit stronger. And some characters, it's not going to fucking matter at all. Like, I don't really know if giving Widow a speed increase matters that much. Not entirely sure. That being said, for the most part, having a speed increase is just going to help the role across the board. And by most accounts, damage dealers feel very, very strong going into Overwatch 2. In a lot of ways, the game feels a lot more like an FPS. Remember the feeling of GOATs back in, you know, I don't know, forever in Overwatch where the game felt almost like a MOBA? That is the way the game doesn't feel. It's the opposite. It's much more similar to the feeling that we had back in the triple DPS wrecking ball with 2 aggressive support meta, where it was like maybe Mercy, Zen, triple DPS, and ball. Something like that. A lot more frag-centric, a lot more sporadic, a lot more deathmatchy, far less, you know, decision-making from a tactical perspective. I mean, there's still tactics, of course, but shooting matters, damage matters, and burst matters. So a lot of coordination in the dives between the DPS. There's going to be some things that are just gonna feel very similar. Of course, certain divers with CC being reduced are going to be more enabled. Characters like Tracer and Genji with less of a stun or no stuns at all. These characters are going to be activated in ways that they weren't before. And as someone who has just wasted 1,000,000 hours into fucking Genji for the character to be not very good at high ranks for a very long time, I'd be curious if he actually sees substantial play. And also, as someone who played Ana a lot, I actually like the matchup between Genji and Ana. It's a fun one. But anyways, I'm getting off topic. Damage dealers are going to feel a lot similar to the way they were before. Of course, there's some characters that are leaving, like Doomfist, and there's some characters that are being added, like Sojourn, or characters that are being really, really changed, like Bastion and Sombra. I actually saved the DPS role for last because I think there's the least to talk about. I think it actually changes the least in the game. And let's be fucking honest, if you were a DPS main before, you're still going to play DPS. Come on, man. Don't even lie. But honestly, if I were to say one defining thing that is going to change in Overwatch 2, it's going to be an increase needed in mechanical skill, and there's going to be a slight decrease in the mental tactics and attrition required. So when you think about it that way, think about what role you would like to play in that. what role kind of shines the best to you. Of course, you're going to try them all when Overwatch 2 drops, but then after you do try them all, I would suggest focusing up, tightening that role to one role, tightening that hero pool to a small amount, and yeah, that's the best way to improve. That's the best way to become absolutely cracked. And of course, the GameLeap website is the best place to completely dominate. We're going to be doing a full website remake on Overwatch 2. We're going to be just building up advanced guides from the ground up with a lot of top gamers. So make sure you check it out right now down below.